Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials, where we have an interview around one of the basic concepts of Raj Yoga, that spiritual study. And tonight, the focus is a second installment on karma. And we'll begin as usual with a short reflection. So I invite you to be seated comfortably. And as always, feel free to experiment with eyes open. This is more of a reflection than thinking meditation. So just having a chance to go inside and experiment in our inner world. And as we're sitting here, I invite you to think about not all the actions of the day, but maybe pick up on one or two. It might have been an interaction with someone or fulfilling a responsibility, a task, relationship, work, home. Try and think about something, even something as simple as going shopping. So, in your inner theater of the mind, replay that moment exactly as it was, performing that action, driving the car, whatever it might have been. And take a moment to slow it down and check in on what you're feeling inside as you perform that action. Or was I just focused on the action? What was my inner state as I performed that action? And we do tend to be very focused on the action and unaware of our state as we perform the action. Yes, sometimes we might feel rushed or impatient or caring. But the question we're asking today, did I feel content, full, as I went into that action? And if you're not sure, experiment right now as I perform this action of listening. I also become aware of my inner state. Am I content, full, that deep peace as I perform the act of listening? This capacity to perform the act whilst also being aware of my inner state. Om Shanti.
Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials. So tonight's talk is we are continuing with this aspect of karma. So that's a very useful reflection to start us in this continued discussion. One of the things that we were discussing last week was about taking personal responsibility for things that happen. And we had talked about facing situations with a sense of self. And in relation to that, regarding the reflection, what have you discovered between the relationship between your how you feel, if you're in a state of peace when it comes to responding to a situation in this context of taking responsibility.
We had a very useful class this morning on this topic, and it talked about this idea of performing a good act. And I'm sure we all have our good karma. Karma means action, and we all have our own ideas of what a good act is. But what this looked at with respect to a good act is, what is my inner state as I come into action? And even to contrast a bit, and what I've discovered relative to your question is that to have a sense of being connected to myself as I perform an action, that's my responsibility actually. Isn't so much the act. The act, I think, will be good if I am connected to myself, if my stage is good. Is that I had to, constantly refine, but discover what it feels like when I am connected to myself. And in the case of Raj Yoga, also connected to the source of goodness, the Supreme Soul, what that feels like, so that I have a very clear indicator in a second of whether or not I'm on or off. If I don't have that connection with myself and with the source of goodness as I come into action, then I will most definitely want something, have some desire from the action itself. And that is not a good act. So, for each of us to know, what does that feel like? That's been my own sort of very kinesthetic approach to this invisible stuff, is to know exactly what it feels like. And yes, we say Om Shanti. That's actually meant to be a litmus for what it feels like when I am connected to myself and to the source of goodness. It's not meant to be a greeting, or I need your attention right now, or I think we're done. It's actually meant to be, I am a peaceful soul. That's what it feels like when I am connected to myself, and when I'm also very fulfilled by my connection to God or goodness. And so to ask yourself, do I have that feeling as I come into action? Because when I really am there is no urgency or neediness in the act. This morning as I was driving, it's very interesting. I was driving and supposed to arrive at a certain time. It's very carefully timed, the place I'm arriving to. And I thought I was doing fairly well. And, I got about 5 minutes from the house. And just before I turned closer to downtown, they are doing construction in the neighboring community. And at that moment, as I was coming down the hill, I could see from a distance that the road was completely blocked. And the construction workers had the stop signs up, well, slow, and then it turned to stop because clearly no one was going. And the trucks were just trying, as they do, to maneuver themselves. They were going to get out of the way, but I could tell it was going to take a while. And it just got more and more interesting. So I stopped. I could see, even if they were able to clear one lane, they were going to let the oncoming traffic through first. But then it got to even better. There's a big lineup behind me because it's taking a very long time. And I think I'm probably late at this point. And then the city car, I don't know what they were going to do, but they kind of came down on the side of the oncoming traffic as if to, I guess, jump in front of all of us. I'm not sure, and I have no idea, but now they were blocking things further. And I remember the whole time feeling so completely blissed out, even though this was a complete disaster from the perspective of achieving my objective of reaching in time. But internally felt completely blissed out, good wishes. I could see this was very stressful for the construction workers on the road trying to manage the traffic. I could tell that oncoming traffic didn't know what was going on. and because it was off ramp to a major thoroughfare, so it was getting quite interesting. And eventually, it all cleared itself off, and but I remember that feeling of so calm, so blissed out, no sense of urgency or what's going on, and this is now a further disaster. It was just very entertaining, actually. And then once I cleared through, I felt a responsibility to reassure the souls that I'm supposed to be meeting with because I'm now late. And I remember calling and just saying I'm late and still very blissed out. And they're like, oh, okay, thank you for calling. Bye. So, anyways, that it's a very small scene, but to be more connected to the outcome, less connected to the outcome of things or wanting things to go a certain way. And what's more of a priority is my state one of well-being.
I had a two-part question, but then you're sharing literally a different question came to mind. Part sharing, brief sharing, because I'm not the interviewee, but related to this aspect of karma is that many feel as if they're being tested. I mean, that's another question we'll talk about later. Hope with the short time that we have is about being tested by God, but being tested. And one time I looked up the meaning, historical meaning of being a test, and it actually came from examining the authenticity of gold. That really stayed with me in terms of the authenticity of anything, in terms of any situation. So when you were sharing, it felt like it was this opportunity to test the authenticity of, is that real peace that you're feeling, or is it based on something conditional, which I don't think sometimes we realize it can be based on something conditional until something happens.
Later the same day, I was, this is an example in the fitness facility, but I think applies to what you're sharing. So I went to do an exercise and I picked up a weight and it felt pretty darn heavy to me. But later on, one of our personal trainers, who's about twice my size, came on the floor. I'm thinking, he's very sweet. He'll never say anything insulting. But I'm thinking, if he went to lift this weight, it would be like a feather. Nothing. He feels. So we only call something a test if I haven't developed the strength or stage. I will experience it as a test. God doesn't need to give me tests. Nothing needs to. Something that's challenging for one person will not. It's so much to do with what's going on inside of me, whether or not something is a test. If God had to spend his time coming up with all of these different tests for the 8+ billion souls, there's no way. There's no way. So he doesn't have to, because each one is perfectly suited. It's just my inner state that determines whether or not something is a challenge or a test. And so I sit there with my little weight and I try to master that so I can move to another challenge. So to understand when we say personal responsibility or even just personalized, and it's not that anyone's done anything bad. I think we have such a difficult and almost negative relationship with karma, which in some way, a little bit, kind of suggests we have a bit of a negative or limited concept of capacities, that we're bad. We do bad things. And rather than seeing the bigger picture of we're great, and we seem to have lost some of that greatness. So things that were the same trainer, very funny conversation we had before the current situation hit. We were both at a certain training level and we were laughing. I said, oh my goodness, I feel like I've just lost so much ground physically. And he looked at me and says, no, I know. I feel the exact same way. It's like other people see me and they go, "Oh, look, you're doing great." And it's like, you have no idea. He said, we should join a club, form a club of the two, because we're aware of what we're capable of. We don't see it, anything going on as bad. We're just constantly aware of what we're capable of. So now things that seem a little bit more challenging, we have an attitude towards them. Not that, oh my gosh, what did I do there? But rather, no, this is my return journey to my original state. And I said to him, do you promise that I'll get to? And he said, no, I promise you. So it's a very nice conversation, but it's a different way of seeing things. These so-called challenges are trying to build us up. We moved very far from our original state, and it's trying to build us back to that, make us aware of, I need to move back to that original state such that this doesn't feel like a test or challenge anymore.
It sounds like that there needs to be a very broad, sweeping, far-sighted understanding of who I really am, though. And that's an aspect in Raja Yoga. How do I know if that's not just a hope versus it's something that I'm actually increasingly feeling that that's really who I am?
Yeah, we've talked before about this idea of purity, which is very deeply connected to karma, the understanding of karma. And one of the big signs of losing that purity is actually losing faith or confidence in the self. It's actually a lack of purity. We actually think it's valid, these thoughts, that no, look, I'm just, not really doing well here, rather than realizing this is simply an expression of losing that purity or self-value. So it's important to know that, that it's, sometimes, again, I'm sorry to keep using the same, but there were many examples today. That same trainer, he was helping a client, and I happened to be in front of them at the moment, so I could see clearly. And the client went into a particular exercise, and the trainer said, when you're at the bottom range of your exercise, can you just shift your weight slightly to the right? And the client did it, and then kind of came back to start position. And the trainer said, did that feel awkward for you? And he said, yeah. He says, well, actually, that was perfect alignment. So, it's just a sign of getting impure, means misaligned. And so the fact that aligned feels awkward is simply a sign that I've spent quite a bit of time misaligned. Just as we say that when abnormal begins to feel normal, then we should be concerned. So
Promise we don't always feel that.
we don't. We need that objective eye, which is a big role that God plays, that objective eye to say you're off alignment and you don't even know. But this is impurity, is misalignment. That's all. And if you really sit down and think, like honestly, but no one should lack faith in themselves, no matter how many mistakes they've made. We're never going to get anywhere if we just continue to let those mistakes define us. So I need to know the big picture. I need to understand why I'm making those mistakes and what happened. But the underlying feeling towards the self has to be a pure feeling, deep faith and trust in the self, that we are intrinsically good rather than originally bad.
Now, it's interesting. I know it's not about fitness, but you often share that there are some who don't even have a sense of body awareness.
Yeah.
And when you were sharing about being able to feel, what does that feel like when I'm in a certain situation, so I know if I'm on or off, so that I would be able to perhaps maybe get back on again. Now, when it comes to a lack of body awareness, there's also a possibility I actually lack a sense of awareness of how I feel. And so during your journey in this study of Raj Yoga, whether it's with yourself or maybe others who've shared, what has helped to regain that?
I think there's two parts: what it feels like and what I need to do. And in probably the oldest scripture, the Gita, it goes deeply into actually the law of karma and understanding it. And it talks over and over again about you must perform the action, but be detached from the consequences of the action. And people are like, I don't know what that means. Do I do the action? Do I not? I mean, because our understanding of action is that we're always very attached to the outcome of the action. What's the point of doing it otherwise, we think? And so I think that's a really important thing to sort out. And so the objective, what I want it to feel like is I don't want to feel like I need anything from the action, nor do I feel like the action is defining really shaping who I am. So this real sense of fullness as I come into action, call it detachment. It's another form of purity where the action isn't, I don't want anything from the action. I don't need even to perform the action. I feel full going into it. So there's this real sense of easiness and peace and maturity and grace. So there's different qualities that one will feel as they're performing the action. So that's the objective. How do I get there? I am going to have to link up with a source of fulfillment other than the action. I need to replace what I was trying to get from the action with some other source of fulfillment, which of course is something Raj Yoga looks at quite deeply, where to get that attainment from.
Do you find that regarding that piece, and because you're meaningfully having a relationship with the source, that fulfillment, do you experience that then there are a lot of things that you do that the outcomes may not be really actually something that's of interest to you, or maybe it's not going to even come into some sort of visible fruition?
I find if I'm honestly linked to God, there's even some actions I choose not to do anymore. You know, a classic example is I see someone that's like, let me help. It's like a knee trigger, let me help. And then if I connect to God, it just changes completely how one operates. And you realize, I'm not actually trying to help at all. I'm just trying to look like a hero. These people are totally capable of sorting it out. And if I'm really going to help, let me just quietly give feelings of support, confidence. Let me have confidence in them, leave them alone. So there's so many actions we perform that are motivated by selfish motives. And if I am connected, if I'm getting all of that from God, there's a lot I don't need to do. So my life gets a whole lot easier. Some people say, I'm so busy, and really, I mean, I'm probably one of them, but I often stop. I remember there was one day when there were so many projects, and I was lying in bed and feeling a little bit anxious because I did the math and realized that there was no possible way with the amount of time to complete the projects required. It was just physically not possible. And so I'm lying in bed and going, for a while, decided to get anxious because my only thought was, I have to get them done, but I can't. And so you're left in this quandary. And I thought, okay, what if you don't get them done? What's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? And I don't want to sound irresponsible, of course, it might, but what if you don't get it done? When I was really honest, I thought some people might be upset with me. I would lose someone's approval or pleasure. They would not be pleased with me. And I thought, that's the worst thing that's going to happen. You're sitting here almost having a heart attack because someone may not be pleased. And again, it's not that I don't care about people, but I think everyone knows what we're talking about. that a lot of what we do is just to please people, and so that we get the ego kind of is fulfilled. And I remember that feeling of letting it go, because the bottom line is the things I do are so enjoyable. They're like coming from a place of inner creativity, and like being a child all day, and to allow that love to fuel what I'm doing rather than this ego pleasing situation. And I remember, it was very easy to fall asleep after letting go, detaching. And the next morning there were emails saying, so you know what, you don't have to do this project, or, we can do this. And my favorite was, this happens to me quite often, it seems, but I was sitting there going, there's no way I'm going to get this all done. And one of the partners was a lawyer in another city, and he called, and we had it was a whole magazine spread, and it was done. And he called and said the organizers have looked at it and they want to change everything. And I think it was only a 2 days or something away. And literally, I was at that point, you're just thinking about God, because there's really nowhere else for your head to go. Okay. And, I remember feeling so peaceful, even though it was absolutely impossible. Because there were a whole bunch of other things going on too. And he waited for a moment, and he said, I don't think I can, I don't think I can do that to you. He apologized profusely. He said, I am so sorry, but I'm going to take this project from you and give it to someone else. And inside, of course, I was absolutely overjoyed. But I was like, oh, no problem. He was so concerned, because many artists feel it's mine. I have to complete it. No one else should work. And, very insulted. And I was just touched, first by being detached that an outcome could come that everyone would be happy with. But second, completely happy with wherever the project went, completely detached. So this detachment, which comes from fulfillment, creates an energy that helps things to move in an accurate direction.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we're going to throw that classic Pink Panther example.
Right. For those of you who have no idea, listen to past episodes. I'm sure it comes up.
The essence of it, though, is that when do I know when it feels right to finish something? And when do I know when I'm doing it because of ego or attachment?
I've had several Pink Panther incidents, and I think for me, I know the difference. I know what it feels like inside. One is, it's always this idea of, I'm going to say peace, but whatever a connection to yourself feels like. For me, it feels very silent, very calm, very easy. Whatever soul consciousness or that sense of I am a spiritual being feels like, that will always be one's litmus paper. If that's not there, then something's off that I need to look at. So if I am working on something or working with someone on, a project, it can be anything, interaction, not. But if something's going on, this spirituality connected to expressing my potential, so this is called self-respect, versus this arrogance, and which one's driving me to try and complete the project? Because both will stretch. Both have the capacity to stretch a lot. True. Ego can make us do crazy stuff, but it will feel so stressful and so peaceless, and so you're so irritated by everything and so horrible, and it creates a disaster. Whereas when I'm stretching myself, other situations when I've been really stretching myself, because there's that peace and that love, these very beautiful qualities, because I'm connected, I'm aligned. So again, it comes back over and over to know what it feels like when I am aligned, connected to myself, connected to God, versus when that contrast, I need to know what it feels like, because that will help a lot. It's the law of karma cares about what's driving the soul as they perform the action, not the action itself, but what's the intention, what's the motivator, what's the driver, what's the consciousness. Is there any impure intention? That's what the law of karma cares about. So if I am in a pure place, very fulfilled, very content, very peaceful, very much myself, and really getting what I need from God, it's remarkable. It doesn't mean I don't. People think, well, then I'm not going to do anything. Quite the contrary. This organization of the Brahma Kumaris has a history, as we look a lot at the original jewels of souls.
In that moment of just checking yourself if you're actually connected or not, do you have to wait till afterwards to notice that, oh, that wasn't really meaningful? Maybe I thought it was. And so when you were sharing, this is connected to perhaps the first thing that you were sharing about being able to know, in a second what my state is. And then we discussed about the lack of that sense of awareness. Do you find that sensitivity is kind of like a magnifying glass? It has to become more and more refined so you can see the subtle details in that sense.
I think so, yeah. I think it's, if we use the example of physical fitness, many people, when they go in, they're completely unaware of what they're doing. The only reason they know that it was off is the next day they're injured or sore, right? They didn't know it at the time. It wasn't until the next day. But as you continue along, it's like, okay, the next phase might be, okay, I'm not completely aware, but immediately after, it's like, okay, that didn't quite go as it could have. And then you finally get to the point as you gain that experience where while you're doing the exercise, you can feel this is off. And it's the same with spirituality, as you become more and more aligned, more awake, more aware, more subtle, which is what spirituality really invites, then you can be in the moment knowing I am off. There's a very beautiful story with one of the administrative heads of the past, Dadi Prakashmani. I know we've heard it, where in essence a soul had come and these usually involve translations, so there would be someone often witnessing these interchanges, and they were quite upset about something and, if you will, for lack of a better word, complaining to Dadi, and she was just listening and wasn't saying anything or trying to explain or anything, just listening, very, very sincerely listening. And at the end, the translator, when the soul had gone, the translator said, why did you not explain? Why did you just listen like this? Like, why didn't you do anything? And she says, oh, but I was doing something. I was checking myself. I was checking my stage. I was checking my powers. I was checking my understanding. I was doing something. So that habit of paying more attention to my inner alignment and knowing that through that I am showing up in a useful way, so that soul did go away content, and she didn't really have to do much other than be aligned. So if we could just develop the habit of paying a little bit more attention to, which I think is the speciality of Raj Yoga, is it keeps improving our sensitivity to what is going on inside of ourselves at quite a deep level, at a spiritual level, as opposed to what's going on around us or with other people. I think that helps a lot.
That's a powerful topic and such a deep topic. And I know we're running out of time, but perhaps maybe the last thing is, what is God's role in terms of this aspect of yoga? when it comes to karma? What does yoga have to do with law of karma, consequences, taking personal responsibility?
Going into tonight's section, I had the phrase karma yogi in my head a lot. And sometimes when I compare karma yogi, I know many have heard that and often translated as performing charitable acts. And it is, but it's a much fuller feeling around it. If we can replace the word charitable with in a contented state, I think that term starts to make sense. But the way I sometimes think of it as in our original pure state, very healthy, we operated at our highest potential. And then we suffered an injury. Now, when the body suffers an injury, we call it a physical injury. What we actually suffer is a spiritual injury. It's completely understandable. It's the result of starting to lose power as we interact with matter. So it's understandable. But a spiritual injury, is a bit like a spinal injury. We start to go out of alignment. We start to forget who we are. And when we start to forget who we are, it's like we start to actually operate in a different way, very unhealthy. And so then we come into Raj Yoga, we call it a hospital sometimes, this process of returning to a healthy way of operating. And we have moments when we're seated that we experience just beautiful experiences of what it means to be a soul. And when you're in yoga, connection with God in those seated moments, very beautiful. Really, that soul really, really helps to hold and nurture that healthy feeling. It's fantastic. But much the same as physical, when I'm in a zero gravity situation, I can move the injured part properly. But the minute I put weight on it, I go back into that misalignment. The same can happen to us spiritually. When I'm seated in a quiet space, beautiful experiences. And then I see it so often. The moment I come into action and interaction, it's like it's as if nothing happened. So to think about God as I am coming into action is like putting a brace on an injured part of the body. But here we're talking spiritually. God is like a spiritual brace that helps me to hold that alignment and protects me from slipping into old habits. And those old habits are going to pull so hard when I decide to change. So I really need that protection as I come into action. And this is the idea of a karma yogi, that the oldest habit we develop when we are injured is to be motivated by desire. So if I am connected to God as I come into action, and I'll know I am truly connected because I have no desires. And we had mixed up God as the one, not the one who makes us happy, but the one who fulfills whatever I want. So we think, oh, yeah, I have a connection to God. I'm asking him for this, that, and the other thing. That's actually not his function at all. If I am freed from desires, we'll be in a much happier state. So his function is to bring us to that place of pure intention. So not to say connection to God means I'm having this one-way dialogue where I ask him for a bunch of stuff, but it's where I'm actually quiet and can hear his pure personality and be deeply, deeply feel it really aligning me. That's a connection to God. And then to use that as I come into action is karma yogi. And that's going to require me to do. God can't do it to me. I have to use God in that way.
Thank you. We will not have a part 3, karma, but it is such a powerful topic. And hopefully, if you haven't had a chance to see part 1, hopefully we'll help to address some of the questions that often come up with this very sensitive but a wonderful topic, actually, a very empowering topic. And maybe we'll give a sneak peek that next week the topic will be about spiritual study. So I feel that's
I
very
didn't even know what
connected.
it was next week. So
Surprise!
good to know.
And I don't know if it's a good thing to share that or not, because maybe we'll change it on you, but perhaps we will end with a little reflection.
In 1 second, I take my attention inside. As if I'm deeply longing to reconnect with that experience of my true nature, that deep peace. That's all the soul really wants. It's that feeling, that soothing, healthy feeling of being at peace. And it's very simple. To just remember that I am a spiritual being, a traveler through time, eternal, able to have this experience of expressing through the body, but letting everything come and go as it should and will, staying light, free, nothing really belongs to me. It's like a heavy weight being lifted from my mind, one that I myself was holding on to. Just for the moment, feeling that weight lift, the mind breathe, and that peace from within start to flood into my mind. Filling my mind with well-being, a sense of contentment, just in this moment, wanting for nothing, completely full. And imagining going through the day in this state. How would I drive the car? How would I interact with others? How would I shop? Everything. All the ordinary acts of the day. How would they happen, feel, when I would be in this state of deep peace, contentment, free? Perhaps if I take a second sometimes before performing the action to come to this place inside, reconnect, and then come into action. Just experimenting, bringing spirituality into my actions, and seeing how they might change from the inside out. Om Shanti.
So thank you for joining us this evening. And once again, if you ever have questions, to put it in the chat box, or if you have questions that come later on in the week, you can always email us. Or if you have topics that you want us to discuss in one of these sessions, kindly let us know through email. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it over to Judy to tell us about upcoming sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. So we have on the weekend an inner fitness coming up, and it's Saturday from 2 to 3 p.m. and the topic is timing. So be interesting to see where that goes. So that's on our Zoom platform. And to get that information, feel free to visit our website. It will have all the information on all our courses. And I believe we still will have the drop-in meditations Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6:45 to 7:30. The interviews will continue 7:35 to 8:15. And is there anything else coming up? Yeah, we do have a Raj Yoga course going on, Raj Yoga Experiences. If you've already taken the course, you're welcome to join. That will be this coming Saturday and Sunday, 1 to 2 p.m. And just email us, calgary@ca.brahmakumaris.org, so you can get the Zoom link for that if interested. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining this session, tuning in. Until we see each other again, Om Shanti.